Mick Gordon's Doom 2016 and Eternal soundtracks are some of the best gaming soundtracks of all time, and my personal favorites. Lately, I've been trying to emulate his style of synthesis, and I've learned a lot. There are a few primary principles to his style of sound design, so if you want to make stuff like this, then just wait, cause I'm gonna tell ya. I think the number one most important tool for these kinds of sounds is compression. And I mean like over compression, like way more than normal. Whether it be standard volume compression, multi-band compression, or even spectral compression, you'll be using 50 decibels at least, and upwards of 200 or 300. You can achieve this level of compression in a multitude of ways. Argent Compressor, made by Nimble Tools and Jeff Plays Guitar, was made for this exact purpose, trying to emulate the elusive Doom compressor shown by Mick a while ago. It's got 100 decibels of compression, as well as a multi-band mode, though I personally prefer the standard mode more. It's $40, I'll link it and the other plugins I mentioned in the description. Here's some of what it can do. Okay, this one's gonna be pretty bad. Watch your ears. Now, kind of a trick that he does quite a bit is if we just go ahead and turn this down, it's now down by 70 decibels, and we turn this other one back on. Since this synth up here is not playing the whole time, in its absence, this Argent Compressor will pull out whatever might be able to fill that space, which just so happens to be this synth. So here's without it. And then with it. Fuse Compressor by Minimal Audio is a multi-band upwards and downwards compressor capable of up to 6 bands. It's got around 70 decibels worth of compression, but remember you can always stack these plugins, so that's not much of an issue. It's about $50. This next one kind of has them like baked into the initial patch, but you know, they sure are working. And all together. I think everyone's seen the AU5 video by now. Spectral Compressor by Robert Vanderhelm is a free must-have with up to 32,000 bands of 50 decibels worth of downward and upward compression. This, as well as the other free plugins in his bundle, are a must-have, so definitely pick them up through the GitHub link in the description of this video. Honestly, I couldn't come up with any good examples at the time, so just listen to this by the man himself. Also, feast your eyes on this cool bass I made with and without it. I made my own Doom compressor in Patcher as well. I don't know how many decibels of compression it's got, but I'm certain it's 100 plus. It's using 6 instances of Maximus, both for the standard and multiband sides. I would recommend using the initial settings to start, but you'll have to play around with it. The faster release on either release 1 or 2, the more distortion you'll get. And depending on the situation, if you increase your attack time, you also might get some distortion. The multiband side has a mix knob, attack, sustain, release 1 and 2 controls, as well as the saturator and gain knob, but per band. FL users can get this for free on my Gumroad, link in description, of course. Alright, let's talk wave shaping. This is actually super simple to understand. Think of this like a graph. The x-axis here is the amplitude of your input wave, and the y-axis here is the amplitude of your output wave. The very maximum of the x and y-axis are both 0 decibels respectively. So if your wave only got up to here, for example, anything above that would be unaffected. So this, for example, would do absolutely nothing. That being said, for the sake of demonstration, I've made sure to normalize this saw wave to 0 decibels. Anyways, pretty simply, Moving this curve will shift the value of your input amplitude to your chosen output amplitude, which of course shapes the wave. This right here, for example, is the effective equivalent of Oxford inflator.
I turn the effect up, you'll see it starts curving down to a sinusoidal wave shaping. Notice that once it gets past full amplitude, it bends back around. If you turn clip on, it stops doing that and it flattens it out. It's a super simple function in wave shaping.
So don't spend money on that plugin, it's effectively worthless. And from here, you can kind of add whatever shape you feel like, and that will directly translate to your wave. I just chose a saw wave because it's the easiest to see what's happening. By default, in most wave shapers, this graph is affecting both the positive and negative sides of the wave at the same time. This is called unipolar wave shaping. That being said, many have the option to affect the positive and negative sides separately, turning it into a bipolar wave shaper. As you can see right now, because I have this bipolar mode enabled, I can affect the positive and negative sides of the wave completely separately. Kind of a rule of thumb is if you're affecting a wave, right, such as this sine wave, and I do something like this in a unipolar wave shaper, that is going to be adding square harmonics or odd harmonics. But if I turn this into a bipolar and just do something like this will be adding saw harmonics or even harmonics. You can kind of hear it, it's not nearly as loud just because I don't have the effect as loud, but you get the idea. I think you guys already probably understand how distortion sounds, so we're gonna move on. One thing I want to mention really quickly is what kind of oscillators he usually gravitates to. Simple shapes are the way to go with this kind of sound design. They create a strong foundation without making everything too busy to start. And given what we'll add in terms of effects in a second, you'll want to go simple, otherwise things might get out of hand sonically. Needless to say, I became very fond of 3X Oscillator in the past couple of weeks. Okay, now here's where things get interesting. It's all about experimentation. I'm not going to go over every effect plugin, but let me give you the fundamental idea. Obviously, you can use effects more towards the end of your chain after your main distortion and compression like you might normally. But for this kind of sound design, putting effects more towards the beginning of your chain is the way to go. The compression and distortion are primarily used as a way to bring more character out of the effects used earlier in the chain. I think it'd be better just to give you some examples, so let me go ahead and do that. Alright, there are a couple plugins I want to highlight specifically here. Crisp is made by Robert Vanderhelm. It gives that nice crunch that you get when distorting something with noise. I'm pretty sure it's just using your input signal to ring mod noise. Speaking of that, I don't know why people have been tweaking out about ring mod sidechain, because we've had that thing for a while now, at least for sound design. I know I've used it for this exact purpose, at least for a little bit, that being, you know, the crunchy noise without distortion, but whatever. Pedaling off that, ring mod in general. Whatever stock one you've got, that being the third mode of FL's frequency shifter, or a free one like KiloHeartz or Melda Productions ring mods. These are great for adding weird distortions, or that cool high-frequency ringing you hear in mixed sound design sometimes. Feedback synthesis is something he uses as well. This is kind of difficult to do in FL Studio, but this plugin called ReaDelay can allow you to get super short feedback delays that sound like this. If you run this through a randomized volume running through a gate, you can get a cool random glitch effect that I've used a ton in this project. There are definitely other ways to do feedback synthesis, but I'll go over those once I've discovered them all in a future video. Bitcrushing. It's Bitcrushing. You know what it sounds like. It's great for glitchy stuff. I recommend either KiloHeartz Bitcrush or this plugin called Krush. Buffr glitch. Also by Robert Vanderhelm. This plugin allows for tonal stutter glitches like this. Of course, using a MIDI input. You know that one virtual write-up video from a little bit ago where the filter goes... Yeah, a producer by the name of Techno made a patch and patcher that does this, and I found it pretty useful for adding movement in this kind of sound design. Reverb and delay are a cool thing to add as well. Making them super quiet allows them to get pulled out by the overcompression when your main sound is quiet. I recommend Sala by Fours. It's not only good for this application, but it's also just a great reverb. Finally, I want to mention this KV100 emulator. Mick Gordon is known for using the old ass blaster in his sound design, but I didn't really know how to get the sounds that multi-effects unit can make without quite a bit of hassle or a bunch of money. Luckily, fellow Doom music enthusiast Jarf made an emulation of the unit in Reactor. It's supposed to be able to be used in the free version of Reactor, but I kept getting a warning and a 30-minute timer and ended up just paying for the full version, so keep that in mind. Links to all the stuff I just mentioned in the description, of course. If you ever want to talk sound design, music theory, share what you made, or anything else music related, join the Discord. Link in description. Okay, now that we've got the fundamentals down, it's time to go crazy. I'd like to introduce you to my baby, the best plugin, not only in FL Studio, but of all time. Patcher, a highly modular node-based, well, node-based whatever you want it to be. Whether it be synthesizer, effect, or controller, Patcher can do it all. I'll do a full video on everything Patcher can do eventually, but the important thing here is the ability to use these nodes to route however we want, making parallel chains stupid easy. Once again, let me just show you some examples of what you can do. This time, I'll fully dive into the basses from the last section. Okay, the first bass we're going to go over is this one. Starting out, I'm just going to turn the effects off, and then let's look at the patch itself. Okay, we've got kind of two segments here. We've got the sub portion of the patch, and then the sort of like wobble portion of the patch. First of all, I am of course running 3x oscillator. Like I said earlier, it's kind of best to start off with something super simple so you can build off it more effectively. Along with that, this one does use quite a bit of bends, and it's way easier to do those in FL Studio with a stock plugin than anything else. This is of course just a sine wave. That's what it sounds like off the bat. And then I've got that running into this plugin called WideFire. I don't know if it's free still, but it was free at the time I downloaded it. And it's a distortion, but its harmonics are stereo. And then you can change if that's side only or not. But here's what that sounds like. And then I've got that running into an Argent Compressor. I don't think I changed any of the settings. I kind of just slapped it on. Makes it a bit louder. And then I've got that running into just a mid-side EQ. Take out some of the side harmonics that were added in like the absolute sub region. Just a little bit cleaner that way. Now for the sort of wobbly side, starting off with another 3x oscillator. I'm pretty sure this is just a saw wave. Yeah, these other ones are quiet. And then I'm running that through a filter with quite a high Q. I think the reason that it makes that sort of like wobbly sound is because I got the Q so high and the actual note being played so low, it's kind of like allowing the harmonics of that super low note to appear and disappear as the actual low pass itself, you know, shifts up and down in frequency, which gives that wobble sound. And of course I have this controlling the actual low pass there. I've then got that running into another WideFire. That's running into a limiter because it was just like way too loud. Got that running through another Argent Compressor, and the compression on this is quite a bit lower because I just didn't really need that much. Adds a bit more crunch though. Got that running through a Distortion, which seems like it's not doing that much. It's kind of more just compressing the sound. So a little more compression there, or saturation if you will. This EQ is kind of just clamping the frequencies, so not too much of that high end is going through, just because I wanted this kind of sound. And then this patcher here is a distortion, as you can see here, and that is controlled by this automation, which just kind of increases it over time. So we have it sort of normally over here. You go to this, and then it slowly becomes this, just as like a transition to the outro of the song. And then this is what those sound like together. Turning on the effects, we're going to start off with this one. By the way, this kind of configuration you see here is an XY fade. This one and the previous one are just controlling the like X portion, just because I didn't need the Y, as you can kind of see here. Yeah, what's going on with this one? First of all, I'm splitting out the sub here. Just with this frequency splitter over here. And then everything else is running through a little distortion here, just adding some positive harmonics. And this snap heap actually isn't doing anything. I don't know why it's still there, but... So that's just, you know, the extra part distorted. Then I have it also running through a reverb just for some extra like ambience, specifically using Sala here on 100% wet. And for whatever reason, when I actually put the Sala on, some kind of transient was happening that was getting passed through. So I used a transient shaper to kind of boost it because I just liked how it sounded. And this is of course what that all sounds like together. And then over here, as you can see, I have this automation, which is for my crisp. One of them is just on crispy, and then the other one is on soggy. The soggy mode has just a little bit more noise, and I just kind of mix it in a little bit just because I wanted, you know, some more noise. And then that runs, you know, permanently. Second bass. And here is the patch. And let's of course start off by turning the effects off here. Pretty sure that's just the reverb, yeah. And get into it. I'm gonna full screen this one actually. So once again, we kind of have two elements here. We've got our main bass and then the sort of like ring layer, if you will. And let's just start with this. Obviously starting off with 3x oscillator. That's just a sub bass there. Once again, the reason I'm doing that is so I can do some cool bends here. Also, what I've got going on is this pitch envelope, just to give it some kick. I forgot to mention that in the last bass. I've got that there as well. Got that going into some distortion. Crisp, of course. Obliterate, which also was free at the time I got it. I don't know if it's still free. It is a crazy distortion plugin. And I've got that automated. Got shaper table here. Just to absolutely crush it. Then that's going into some other stuff we'll go over later. Starting off with our ring layer. We're starting with a citrus. Just some, you know, FM stuff. Just to like start out. And then that's going into this interesting layer here. We got the actual ring itself coming from a ReaDelay, which is just getting some extra gain here. So we're going to ring out even louder. I don't know how 30 milliseconds was able to create this sound I was looking for, but I'm going to ask you to be careful when using this plugin because it can like create some massive DC offset that just does not go away, and then you kind of have to reload your project file. So just be careful with that. Either way, I have them combining into this fruity balance here just for some more control. It's going into a Bitcrusher. Anyway, I've then got them both running into this thing here. It's just a frequency splitter, and I'm routing the sub out into this TDR Kotelnikov, which is a compressor. Pretty great compressor. I would definitely recommend it. It is free. Just to make sure the sub is a consistent volume. That's then going into the SinuZoid I was talking about earlier. Just to give it some movement. That's going into a WideFire whose harmonic levels are also being automated. And that's got a high pass on it just to make sure my sub isn't being affected. Argent Compressor, of course. A Soothe 2 just to get rid of like some really harsh frequency here. I guess it was kind of overpowering my sub. That's going into a 2-band fuse compressor. Once again, just compressing the sub to make sure it's a consistent volume. And then a Spectral compressor just to increase the highs a little more. This P controller is just controlling the volume of some other synths. And then we've got this going into a reverb. And then we've got some variation because of the frequency bending. This affected the ring really weirdly, and I love it. Next, I've got some basses I made specifically for this video here, and we're going to start off with some of the smaller ones. This here. Just this patch right here, which is just a bunch of voices. I'm doing the, I think it's called a Kirker's bass thing, but with super saws. And then we just have an extra saw layer here to kind of fill it out. That's going through some distortion and reverb. And then pretty much most of what's happening is just this Argent Compressor here. And then I'm cutting out some frequencies I didn't like. Really excessive, but you know, we got this sound here. Once again, Mick Gordon loves using this like really weird high frequency stuff. So I decided to make some of that. We just have this faceplant patch here, which is 2 sine waves whose harmonics are being like way higher than they're supposed to be, going through a ring mod. And they just played pretty high up. And then that is going through the Blitz compressor here. It's just the stock settings here. Multiband all the way off, just the normal compression. just make it a bit louder, I guess. And then for the main sound itself, kind of where all the interesting stuff comes from. And this is a heavily layered sound here. Starting off, we have our starting sound here. As you can see, not super complicated, kind of just like a filter bass with some distortion on it. And also these unisons are completely mono, as you can see by the width here. By the way, if you guys didn't know, there's a back tab. And then this envelope is controlling like the master tuning, so I can get like a little bit of a kick out of it. Anyways, going over the top part, that's running through this EQ here. I don't know why I'm taking out so much low. That's then running into a fat rack. Make it a bit fatter. Another EQ. Oh, I now recall why I did this, because I didn't want too much of the low end running into the fat rack, otherwise it would sound a bit too distorted in that respect. So we got that running through the fat rack, and then I'm getting the low end back. That's running through an isotope trash, which has a pretty odd distortion here, of course in bipolar mode. And I've got the dry wet not all the way on, so this is dry, this is wet, and we got that mixed in. Just add some crunch, and that's then going through an OTT. Then here you've got the next layer, where the original synth is going through a Bitcrusher, through a sound goodizer, which is basically an OTT, and then ye old Obliterate to obliterate it, of course. And then we've got an individual one running through the I'll just call it the JV100. I don't think I can say that. I will bleep the other one out. And I don't even know what I'm doing to it. I just wanted some extra layer. This plugin is really interesting. I'm gonna have to experiment way more with it. And then those 3 layers are going into a sub split patcher, just to split out the sub so I can add some stereo width to it. Sounds pretty good by themselves. And then I've got them running through an Argent Compressor, which is going to be important for later. And then a free clip, just to make sure it's not like clipping at any point in time. But let's go over this other part here. So we've got it running through a delay. And I kind of experimented a little with the settings of this while all this other stuff was on, just because I thought it sounded super cool, but we're going to go over that in a second. That's going through this here, this EQ peak, just to peak some EQs, you know, a couple transient shapers to make it a little more snappy. That's super loud. Some even more peaks here. That's probably why I had it running for that. We've got Spectral Compressor number 1, makes it even more snappy somehow. We're taking out all the bass here, and yet another Spectral Compressor, which makes it even more snappy somehow. And then that is running through the Argent Compressor as well. So kind of the important thing here, right? So when the main bass goes quiet, the delay effects get louder. And that's a technique that uses a lot. When the main bass gets quiet, whatever's left gets pulled out by the compressor. Let's go ahead and go over our last bass here. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. First of all, turning off all the effects. And into the patch we go. Okay, let me discern what the fuck is happening here. It seems like we've got 3 elements here. We've got our main bass up here. We have a layer running down here. And then we have the, you know, glitchy ring effect through here. I'm going over the main bass first. We've actually got 2 things running here. I'm going to start off with this 3x oscillator since it's just easier. And that's just a sine wave with a pinch envelope, making it kicky. And then since someone in my Discord asked if I could use more VCV rack, I've got that in here. So now I gotta explain this. And before I can explain it, I have to figure out what I even did. We've got our VCO here, which is just a sine wave. And we got a randomizer, which is putting its exponential out into this Bernoulli gate so I can get like an on and off kind of effect. And that out is going into the FM of this VCO. So we're getting that, you know, glitchy sound at random, of course. We then got this white noise, starting off with violet noise, which is kind of just, you know, like that. That's running into a VCA, which is just a voltage controlled amplifier. It's just, you know, like a volume, just so I could control its like overall level a bit. This is at 0.6% basically. That's running into this other VCA, which is once again just an amplifier, just a volume. And I've got the gate, which is like the on and off from my MIDI, going into this ADSR, which is then controlling the actual volume of the noise. So if we go out here and turn this like way up, you can hear basically what it's doing there. It's just noise. Pretty simply from there, I have those both going into this VCF, which is a voltage controlled filter. It's just a filter, and the cutoff is being randomized. Go ahead and hear what that sounds like. We just sort of have a random filter going on. That is then, of course, going straight into this distortion here, which is a distortion, obviously. And then I have that going into another filter with another random going into the cutoff, and I'm pretty sure I had the low pass going out. So overall, it's just a very randomized patch, so I could get some cool glitchy stuff. But yeah, VCV rack is great for this kind of stuff. Great for sound design. I will definitely be using it more, especially for randomized stuff. Anyways, those are then both going into this Argent Compressor here, and you can hear the this one here is kind of holding down most of the actual kick itself, and then they are both combining to make the sub, and then this is making every once in a while, you know, some glitchy effects. But since the other one also has the sub, when the glitch of this turns on, aka this oscillator going really high, we still have sub available. And once again, just stock settings on that Argent Compressor. That's then going through a Spectral compressor, which seems to really clamp it down. It is spectral. It is compressing. You get the idea. Going into an EQ, boosting the low end a ton before it goes through kind of everything else. That's then going through a crisp to make it just a little crispy, just 1% crispy, you know. Then going through a SinuZoid, just for some good old sound design. And then finally for this side, we've got that going through our Argent Compressor. Stock settings. It is an Argent Compressor. You get the idea. For our layer over here, starting off with our layer over here, we've got this serum patch. These are both just saw waves kind of messing with the phases of some of the bins here. This one is just completely randomized. The other one was also completely randomized, but I just clamped on some of these bottom ones. Being combined with white noise and a sub. This one's an octave up, and this envelope is of course going to the master tune to make a, you know, make it more kicky. And that's going through some distortion, multiband compression, getting rid of the sub there as well. That's going through another SinuZoid. This one's a bit more aggressive. That's going through an Obliterate, just distorting the crap out of it. And then an M freeform phase, which is effectively acting like a disperser. And then we've got our like glitchy ring here. This is kind of the same thing as I was talking about before, where we've got a delay, super short time, 1.2 milliseconds here. Got some EQing, that's getting distorted through here. Some more EQing just to take out all the bass, otherwise it would sound like this, which we do not want. So we're really clamping down on that, giving it a little bit of stereo width. And then we have a random P controller going into this volume, so we can then throw it through a gate, so it only comes through every once in a while. And overall, those together sound like this. First thing I did after that, if we turn the effects on, is have this fruity balance, making sure it's only playing when I want it to. That's then going through a crisp, a little more noise this time, little more crispy, an OTT. And then we're just boosting the low end a little bit. And then this filter is just for this section over here, which we can get this sound by running basically what is just a sub into the crisp, since the crisp is not being affected by this filter here. And yeah, that's the sound. I don't think I meant to put that there. Along with everything else, as well as the sidechain, because there are a couple of kicks up here. I'll go over like a bunch of the other sounds in a bunch of shorts once I've actually released this song. Speaking of which, this will be releasing with a rather large project sometime in like August. And I'll also be posting track breakdowns of it. Those will probably be on like a Patreon or something, since those get like no views. It won't be too expensive though, maybe like $1 a month. And of course, this being sound design, I highly encourage you to take these concepts and experiment till hell freezes over. I think this process of sound design is super cool. I've already been an advocate of parallel chains. You might know that if you've seen some of my track breakdowns, but this turns it in a direction I hadn't really considered before, specifically in the creativity with layering. I especially love the 100+ decibel compression, and I'll definitely be using it to enhance my sound design from now on. If you want to see more videos like this, like and subscribe, and maybe watch another on my channel. That's all for now. I know I've been gone a while, but there's more to come soon. Peace.